thought it'd be interesting to do a little comparison between the Reeve Umnumzaan and the Reeve large Sebenza. On first look, these two knives are very similar. They're both full titanium handle scales with titanium frame locks and roughly the same size S35VN blade. But on further examination and comparison, I think that you'll find that there are actually some interesting differences between these two knives. So let's take a look. Here's the large Sebenza. Has a stone-washed blade with S35VN blade steel. A single thumb stud that's anodized blue. And there's the blade shape. Right away, this is a big difference from the Umnumzaan, which has sort of a similar belly, but has this harpoon swedge at the top. Also, the Umnumzaan has dual thumb studs which act as the blade stop. And they have these little rubber washers which act as a shock absorber. And Gavin Hawk was the Grant and Gavin Hawk actually were the originators of the shock absorber concept, and Reeve does give credit to the originators of this design in their product material, so that's pretty nice, and they were given permission to use the shock absorber system. The thickness is basically the same. The Umnumzaan is a little bit thicker blade stock, but only just slightly. And the handle scales are very similar. I find the Umnumzaan to have a more squared off look, but it's very, very similar. The jimping between these two knives is very different. They're both really nice, but the Umnumzaan has this rounded, kind of larger pattern, and the Sebenza has this small, more fine pattern. But both are pretty comfortable, and they're both pretty useful too. The spine on the blade is crowned or kind of smoothed over on the Sebenza. It's a little bit flatter profile on the Umnumzaan, but it's still smooth. It doesn't have a sharp edge until you get up here to this harpoon swedge, which is actually quite sharp. It's not sharp enough to cut, but you can definitely hear it catch on your finger. Obviously, one of the biggest differences are these handle scales. The Sebenza has a very clean look. Also, there's more options with the Sebenza. You can get inlays, you can get carbon fiber, you can get Damascus blades, that kind of thing. The Umnumzaan has this textured pattern and this really beefy pivot, which give it a little bit more tactical feel and design. Also, the profile of the handle scales is quite different. If you look at them side by side, you can see that the Umnumzaan dips down and contours to your fingers a little bit more than the straight edge of the Sebenza. Also, the Sebenza obviously has this big cutout to disengage the lock bar, and the Umnumzaan does not. It has this little flat piece here. The Umnumzaan also has this lock bar over travel stop, which is kind of a little bit of a eyesore on this knife, to be honest, but it is a feature that isn't found on the Sebenza. One thing that I thought was interesting about the tolerances on the Umnumzaan is just the how close everything is calculated. When you look at this blade, this thumb stud, and which also is the stop pin. Watch when it opens, how close it comes to this little edge. If I can show it here. When it's moving along its path, right there, there's almost no space between that. You can barely even see light between there, but it just passes, and I just think that's really cool. Also, when you open the Umnumzaan, it's a little bit different angle with your thumb, and it's quieter because of those shock absorbers. On the Sebenza, you kind of go out a little bit more, and you can definitely hear it hitting the stop pin. And that's another big difference between these two knives. The Umnumzaan features 2 points of connection between the construction of the handle scales. This large pivot and this backspacer. Whereas the Sebenza has the pivot, the stop pin, and the backspacer. So as far as simplicity, the Umnumzaan is hands down a simpler design with fewer parts, basically. The Sebenza is still a very simple design, but it does have more points of connection. Overall, which knife do I prefer? That's a tough decision. I like them both quite a bit, but recently I've been leaning towards the Umnumzaan. It's just super smooth, and I love the way it fits my hand, and I really like this jimping. Overall, the blade is going to function very similarly between the two, but I just kind of like the extra details on the Umnumzaan. This pivot, it's just really cool. Still really love the Sebenza for its simplicity of design, the clean lines, and I would love to pick up a couple other versions of the Sebenza, like the inlays or Damascus or the carbon fiber scales. Those would be really cool. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this little video, just a little comparison between these two knives. I'm sure there's probably something that I missed. I knew I missed something, so I just want to add this on. The Umnumzaan has a ceramic ball which functions as the detent ball, as well as the point of engagement between this titanium lock bar and the blade. So you can kind of see right there, you can kind of see that little ball, and you can see the space. That's a pretty neat design element. It's sort of like having a steel insert for your lock bar, so it's going to help with preventing wear, and it's just a pretty neat design feature. So just thought I'd point that out. So feel free to leave comments down below, and I'll see you on the next video.